One man can change the world with a bullet in the right place.
And we are back. Episode 3. I gotta stop saying that we're back with the same episode, with a new episode. And we are back with
the
New
fine.
to Pew podcast. There we go. That's better. And of course, I'm trying not to do my announcer voice, but I'm gonna do it because it's becoming a thing. And we're back with another episode of the New to Pew podcast. I am Max Fallis, the new kid on the Glock. I'm joined by my co-host, the grumpy old man, the master of some trades, the black bag himself. Hello, sir.
How you doing, bud?
Good. And today we're going to discuss.
I love how
Go ahead.
my intro gets more and more absurd as we do these.
Wait till you get to episode 10. I'll run out of ideas at that point. And because of
And this crusty old sumbitch sitting next to me.
and this motherfucker here. So due to recent events and my dark sense of humor, I'm calling this one My Body, My Choice. And we're going to be discussing body armor. Because I have a dark sense of humor. And, you know, I told people
I'm not mad at you.
when I turn 50, I'm cashing in all my give a shit points, and I'm not caring anymore. So I'll be 45 this year. It's a slow progress, and I've already lost a lot of friends. But that's fine. I did warn them.
Wow.
I did. I said, look, when I turn 50, good luck still hanging out. Because I speak a lot of weird shit, and I'm unapologetic about how free my mind is. So there. My body, my choice. Topic is body armor. It's strange to go from buying a handgun right to body armor in like episodes, but
It's kind of a leap, but yeah, and it's only because we're recording them back to back that this seems like, but it's because things keep popping up. So the bill we're looking at is HR 4568, which is actually an older bill from 2019, 2020, but they're all basically the same. And what we talked about before we started recording was I kind of don't even care what the facts are at this point. I know what the game is. So their individual arguments and new bills and everything else really don't matter. It's the same game under another name.
Okay.
And that's banning personal protective equipment.
So currently, it's not illegal to possess and purchase body armor, correct?
Correct. If you utilize it in the commission of a crime, it is an additional charge. However, just the mere possession is not a criminal act. And that's one of the things they're trying to change. Again, they want to make these bogus possessory offenses, which seems to be the name of the game. And that in and of itself is the ban part of the conversation. They don't want you to own it. They don't want you to have it. They don't want you to use it. And the very simple question is, there is no offensive use for body armor. So make it make sense that you want to ban this. It's personal protective equipment. Are we banning helmets, knee pads, N95 masks? Ooh,
Watch out.
yeah, I went there. Face coverings,
I gotta get the soundboard going because that was a perfect
eye
moment.
pro. Yeah,
So,
we need the Scooby-Doo like zoinks.
Before we get into the legality, let's go through variations of body armor. Because
Sure.
your average layman, a.k.a. me, thinks of the quote-unquote bulletproof vest. Because that's what the
Right.
movies told us is what it's called. But essentially, it's a plate carrier is the proper term, correct?
It depends on what you have. Okay. So there's a bunch of different kinds of armor. They are rated. The industry rating comes from the National Institute of Justice. They have a very elaborate testing process. And if you're buying armor, it comes in two categories: NIJ certified and everything else. Sometimes they play funny games with the language and they say, oh, tested to the same standards as NIJ, blah, blah, blah. That is not the same as NIJ certified. Either it's certified or it isn't. So that's the first thing I want to throw out there. With that said, there's a bunch of different ratings. I did a blog post on this several years ago, breaking it all down. Generally, what most departments are using, like most police departments are using at this point, is 3A rated body armor. That is rated for most handguns. Depending on the manufacturer, it may also stop 12 gauge buckshot. But generally, we're talking about handguns up to 44 caliber. Level 3 is rifle rated. Level 3 plus is an industry standard, not an NIJ standard, that came out in response to the advent of steel hard plates that were being used as armor. And what they found was certain high velocity 5.56. So anything, I want to say it was over 2,900 feet per second, was penetrating that steel. So even though it was rated to level 3, common 5.56 ammunition like XM193 that has a higher velocity was zipping right through that. Velocity trumps steel. And there's a lot more to it than that. But you've got 3 plus was meant to mitigate that risk by handling the higher velocity 5.56. And then level 4, which goes up to 30-06 armor piercing. So that's like a ceramic or a ceramic hybrid material that really defeats some high power cartridges. The other stuff is all either handgun rated or intermediate cartridge rated, which is smaller stuff, 5.56, 7.62 by 39, general military calibers before you get into the really big stuff.
Okay, so that's essentially the vest and chest protection. Is the
correct
helmet, knee pads, and other parts rated the same way?
So, yeah, everything is going to have a rating to it. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I think most people don't realize when they buy a ballistic helmet is most of those helmets are only rated to 3A. So that means they're really only going to stop handgun rounds. If you're in a fight against rifles, might not do it, Bubba. So there's a lot going on there. Knee pads generally don't come in ballistic armor. There are like major suits with shoulder pauldrons and full coverage vests. But so if you look at the text of this bill, it talks about enhanced body armor, mm-hmm. which is anything level 3 and up. And that's really the armor that's meant to stop rifle caliber rounds. They don't mind you having the soft armor that the police use under their uniform that's only meant to stop pistols, but they don't want you being able to stop rifles. And this is where I go, the facts don't matter, and the most recent bill doesn't matter because they keep parading out the same old ideas, mm-hmm. and they use it in response to whatever the latest piece of news is that somebody did this or did that. And they just dust off these tired old bills, give them a new name, or pull them out of storage and try to push them through again, because they have no other plan other than to ban things. They're really not good at problem solving. They just want to ban stuff.
Yeah.
So they're going after rifle rated armor.
At the gun show that I went to out in PA, I
mm-hmm.
saw a lot of tables encouraging the purchase of body armor before it was banned. Now, you laugh, but I'm going to tell the audience that you when I asked you about it at the show, you kind of told me like it's like a 50-50 scare tactic for sales versus a possible, something that could possibly happen. I guess because we have bills like this that are always lurking in the shadows and stuff. So, do you think that this can go through or will go through? And what do you think has been stopping it from happening already?
So there's a lot of layers there. So the first part is there's a couple of vendors that have been using the same signs for like 10 years telling you, oh, it's going to get banned any day now, right? Chicken Little says the sky is falling and you better buy armor before it gets banned. The other part of the issue is there's no grandfathering in the bill we just looked at. So even if you possess it, you would be required, if that went into law, to surrender that. So what good is it buying it if you're not allowed to keep it?
Right.
In the eyes of the law. So really the fight is, don't ban things that don't have offensive capability. And the battle cry from the other side is always, well, officer safety. And what if we get into a gunfight and that person is wearing body armor? Shoot him in the face, shoot him in the nuts, shoot him in the pelvic girdle, shoot him in something that's not protected by the body armor. It's right. There, and it doesn't make you invincible. Can it be problematic? Absolutely. It was the late 90s Bank of America robbery where the two guys had quite a bit of very specialized body armor and machine guns that they should not have been able to possess. They broke 50 laws before they went and robbed that bank. And LAPD really had a hard time stopping them. And the piece that often doesn't get reported or talked about much is that SWAT was on the way, couldn't get there fast enough, and officers were going into local gun shops begging them for rifles because they didn't have patrol rifles at the time. That was part of how law enforcement got the patrol rifle model. They had shotguns, they had pistols. There were no rifles on that scene other than the ones the bad guys brought. So they went into the gun shops, got rifles, tried to pin them down. When SWAT finally arrived, they were able to stop those guys. And if I remember correctly, one of them was shot by skipping rounds off the pavement under a car to hit him.
What?
But it was, and we could do a whole case study on that one, but the officer they were on opposite sides of the same vehicle.
Oh.
And the officer basically rolled over onto his side and shot under the car, and some of the rounds skipped up. And when the guy fell down, he continued skipping rounds into him until the threat was stopped. But details. Truth is stranger than fiction with a lot of this stuff. But the long and short of it is, in my opinion, I don't see how that justifies people from having something just because some people did something wrong with it.
I think the actual concern is the imbalance in power. Because if the LAPD, and I'm assuming this was like the pre-crack era, because I remember seeing like militarized LAPD with the battering ram tank knocking down crack houses and shit. So I'm assuming this is before that.
No. We're talking late 90s, right? I was already out of high school. So We're talking 97, 98, somewhere in there, I want to say. Wow. May have been 95 or 96, but it was somewhere in that general ballpark.
Okay.
And you'd have to look it up. But Bank of America, right? You know what? Give me a second. We'll pull it up. But
wow, that's to
turn around and then say that you can't have personal protective equipment because other people did something wrong. I go, I committed no crime. I will accept no punishment.
This may be one of my weird Max thoughts, and there will be a lot on this show. But is it what you said, or is it we don't have it, so we don't want you to have it? Because again, if the officers at the time were going into gun stores and asking for what is readily available on the streets, for lack of a better term, shouldn't they also have access to the same items due to taxpayers paying their taxes and them?
Well, this is where we get into a funny Second Amendment conversation, because what is the purpose of the Second Amendment? Why was that natural right enshrined in the Constitution? And I always go back to, why do we have 3 houses of government? Why is the legislature separated from the executive, separated from the judiciary?
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances. So to then give someone an unfair advantage in force over the people is a violation of that system of checks and balances when it comes down to it. That's my thought.
Would it be fair
and
to...
I've got the trivia answer here for you.
Okay.
The North Hollywood shootout, which is the Bank of America robbery I was talking about in Los Angeles, February 28th, 1997.
So that's 2 years after I got out of high school.
Right.
Wow. Yeah, so, like, okay. Speaking from the layman's point of view, I would think that the local police department would have the maybe the should be the best the best body armor available to give
you
them.
You would be shocked.
I am
so
already.
Here's part of the problem. And I'm not going to name specific departments because I don't want this to turn into
absolutely
an opportunity for bad guys to use that information. But I have worked with large departments who, because of budgetary restrictions and the size of their department, are issuing armor that's not even 3A rated. It's 70s era. Like, it won't stop 9mm. Common 9mm rounds will not be stopped by this armor. But because they only have, it's 3,000 officer department.
Right.
They only have so much money per officer. That's what they can afford to give them. And I was contacted by individual officers from that department and told, come down, bring armor. We want to buy stuff because we're dealing with barricaded suspects. We're dealing with active shooters, and we want better stuff than department issue. So some departments seem to have unlimited resources. Other ones have extremely finite resources. And that's a tricky thing. Right.
In your case, were those officers buying it for themselves, like with their own money? That way, they at least would have it
with their own money. And then a department letter went out that command was very disappointed that individuals don't have faith in their equipment as issued by the department. And I'm going, yeah, sorry, not sorry.
Wow. See, that's something that as a layman, I would think that. So thinking about it now, again, this is another weird Max thought. Is it cheaper to just take it away from the populace rather than give it to the government workers, aka the police officers?
Could be. But is that morally reprehensible?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Because
yeah, I don't buy that as an excuse for that behavior.
Oh, no. I'm not selling excuses whatsoever. I'm always just trying to think of the why. And if it's a money issue, like you said, issuing 3,000 officers a $500, for lack of a better, easy numbers, for a $500 piece of body armor, when you could sit and run up the taxpayer dollar talking about banning it because they charge by the hour. Like, It seems like a shitty waste of taxpayer money when, again, your officer lives are at stake, and like certain areas, people are walking into situations that they're not equipped for.
And this is definitely one of those areas.
Wow.
But again, I go back to, you don't get to take the easy way out with things.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to violate my rights for the benefit of someone else. You don't get to use someone else's bad actions as an excuse to punish me for something I didn't do.
Right.
And that's the morality behind it. And of course, officer safety is always the battle cry for everything from banning body armor to you can't have window tint.
Yeah.
So, is there some validity to that? Yeah. If I was one of those cops and I knew that I had 70s era body armor that was not going to do the job, and I'm going in to deal with a barricaded suspect, yeah, I'd be pretty unhappy about that. And I understand why a lot of them contacted me and said, upgrade me. Right.
Wow.
So
next
it's
question for you. So
sure,
in my line of work, PPE is a must in certain areas.
sure,
Your average hard hat has a lifespan, even if you don't ever have anything hit it. You still have there's like a little, I forgot the organization's name. I think it's ANSI, if I'm not
right,
mistaken. But there's a little number on the inside of your hard hat that when the date hits that, your hard hat is no longer. Does the same thing apply with body armor? Does it have a shelf
yes,
life? Or okay, because even motorcycle helmets too.
absolutely,
They say you're supposed to
yes,
replace your motorcycle helmet every 3 to 5 years, I think, because the
yes.
padding and everything breaks down.
Body armor is the same way, which is why if you're looking to buy body armor, don't buy used body armor. A lot of places will sell like department trade-in stuff,
Oh,
and you have no idea whether that's going to work or not. And the other thing is, depending on what it's made of, things like sweat, the salt in your sweat can break it down. How long it was left in high temperatures. Certain types of armor will delaminate and the layers will separate at high temperature. And I'm not talking crazy high. I'm talking, 105, 125 degrees. Certainly the kind of temperatures you can find inside a vehicle.
Yeah, on a July
In the
day.
sun.
Yeah.
Yep. And you can do a lot of damage to the equipment that way. So it's imperative that you get good quality stuff with an NIJ rating and you keep an eye on those expiration dates.
Oh, they have dates like printed on them, just like a hard hat. Then.
It'll be on it. Yeah, it'll be on it. It'll tell you the date of manufacturer and how long the expected lifespan of that product is.
That's something I didn't. Well, that's why I asked these questions, because I wanted
Sure.
to see if it was because hard hats break down, the plastic and the hard hat breaks down over time, and like you said, the salt in your sweat will break down the foam in your motorcycle helmet.
Yep. And while we're on the subject, same thing with child car seats. They have expiration dates on them too. Take a look at those things.
Yeah.
In case there's any parents listening or watching this.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why when you pick up your kid, you have to bring the car seat in for an inspection. And they have a list of like recalled car seats or, known issues. Yeah. That's a very good point. It's a very good point. You learned something here.
That was a good question on your part. Very thoughtful. Well done.
Thank you.
There's also an inside and an outside to body armor. Mm-hmm. It'll tell you this side towards body.
Right.
And it's because of the way it's either curved or shaped or whatever. It's got to work a certain way.
Right.
So there's usually a big tag on the inside of the armor. Tells you the date of manufacturer. Obviously this side towards chest. All the other information, the NIJ rating, certification. There's usually a lot number on there, so if the armor fails for some reason, they can track what lot it came out of.
Right. And for recalls, is that ever a thing? Like,
oh yeah. One of the manufacturers I dealt with did a very small, not well publicized recall, and it was part of why I stopped dealing with them.
Okay.
Yeah. Their armor was failing at an alarming rate, and they did a very small recall on a very small batch and should have been a much broader, like they really should have recalled a lot of stuff and didn't. And I went, I'm out. And that was the end of that.
With a lot of the recent events going on, something that has been popping up a lot is the backpack body armor. It's, for those who may not know, it's literally a backpack that you flip the backpack part up over in your head while it's still attached, and it becomes a vest.
Right. It converts into a plate carrier. So there's a bunch of different, and that's not necessarily a brand new thing. They've been around for several years. I've sold them. I've got a company that I really like that makes one that I think is really good. There's a lot of limitations to that, though. One is they are expensive. Nobody is making those cheap because it's a simple concept, but it's a complicated execution. The next part is they're pricey, and you still have to add armor to them, and the armor can be expensive. and you can't get away with using cheap steel plates because when you got to flip that thing over your head, and I just had this conversation at a gun show over the weekend, you go to flip that thing over your head and you've got a heavy steel plate in there, you're going to knock yourself stupid and you're going to be out of the fight anyway. Don't worry about the bad guy taking you out. You just took yourself out. So a lightweight plate is essential for that. The other thing most people don't realize, you can get rectangular or 3A rated plates, so pistol rated plates that are soft, that weigh next to nothing, and put them in any backpack you have and add that ballistic protection.
The laptop slot.
Sure, laptop slot. I've had moms stitch it into backpacks for their kids.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you see that as something that may be becoming more mainstream? Because you said the price. Is the price because of the execution of it, or is the price basically because it's a new product that they're really trying to get to take off? And
it's not the convertible backpack is not necessarily a new product. I'm sure there's new ones out there,
right.
But the companies that have been making them, there's a lot that goes into it. It's not as simple as just taking a plate carrier that's $100 and throwing it in $100 backpack and saying, okay, it's $200.
Right.
There's a whole bunch more work that goes into making those things work. And then when you convert them to the carrier, making sure they stay in place the right way, it's not as simple as it sounds. So I think the cheapest one I can remember was $350. And then you're putting another $400, $500, $600 worth of armor into it.
Wow.
So yeah, you're talking about $1,000 investment easily. With that said, you can buy just an armor plate and put that in whatever backpack you have for a couple $100 or less. You might be able to do it for less than $200. It's been a little while since I memorized the price sheet, but I
can see you thinking.
Yeah, it's a harsh reality. And you asked if it's becoming more and more commonplace. I have a feeling it is, and I have a feeling a lot of people just don't talk about it.
True.
Like I said, the parents I've dealt with wanted armor with a good rating that was extremely light so they could put it in their child's backpack and not explain to their child that, hey, there's body armor in here. It's more just the simple fact of, okay, so those drills you practice at school? If that ever happens for real, make sure you get your backpack and you put that on when you run away. And it's one more layer of protection in a worst case scenario without necessarily being specific to the 6, 7, 8-year-old kid as to why and what they're doing.
That's a heavy talk to have.
And that's why I'm pausing so much, is I'm trying to figure out how to explain those things in a way that's not terrifying, because it is. I mean, it's what we're talking about is scary business, right? There's no part of it that's pleasant.
No. I could see it being used for like military press, even, I mean, I could definitely see it being implemented with individual photographers, reporters, and stuff out in, we had recent protests all over the streets and all that chaos. I could definitely see it being used for that, just to step away from the adolescence use. I could see adults using it for other reasons, because I think that was like the main thing of like the reason why it's resurfacing. Basically, I see a lot of ads on social medias and stuff. It hasn't reached like a television commercial yet, but the conversation is coming up, obviously, because of recent events, and it's always focused around secure the child, but there's also great usage for it for like the press covering a war zone, or you know, I see definitely the benefits of having
or
that type of
riot.
product.
You know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's plenty of things that happen domestically where you can justify it. And my day job takes me to some pretty unsavory places at times, and I'm going into people's houses and things like that. And I'm not in law enforcement, but you bet your ass there's times where I bring body armor and I put it on, and I've got a discreet carrier that I can wear under clothing that people won't know I have it on. But if I think there's going to be trouble, yeah, that comes with me for sure.
It has its uses, ladies and gentlemen. It has its uses. As I get back into
Right.
the announcer voice. Well, okay. Here's a common thing. How should your plate carrier fit? This is something that I had to ask you about before. You know, the fit
Okay,
is
so-
a big deal.
Yeah, and you have to understand anatomy a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got a board certified doctor that I do quite a bit of work with, super smart guy. I'm not going to mention his name without permission, but he broke it down for me in that your body armor is really only meant to protect your vital organs. So your lungs, your heart, and the major blood vessels coming up out of your heart, because those are the things that are most vulnerable. So the easiest way to make sure your plate carrier fits the way it's supposed to is when you cinch everything up. First of all, it's got to be snug to your body, right? Because you don't want it moving around. But the top of the plate carrier should land right where your collarbones come together.
Mm-hmm.
If it's lower than that, if it's down here, you're missing major vital organs being protected. It needs to ride high. Covering your belly, if you're an older guy that's got the dad bod like most of us do at this point, don't worry about covering your belly. Those organs are not, you're not going to bleed out in less than a minute and a half with one of those organs, right? It's not going to be pleasant, but with proper trauma care, you'll probably survive. Heart, lungs, major blood vessels, those are the things that are going to cost you your life. Obviously your brain, but protecting your head and face is a whole nother issue. But your plate carrier needs to ride a little bit higher than you think. The bottom of it should fall just below the bottom of your rib cage. So generally speaking, a 10.5 by 12 inch plate is the right size for most people. If you're extremely large, they make an 11 by 14. There's different cuts, different shapes. There's one that's called a swimmer's cut that's really narrow at the top. I don't recommend those because they can be so narrow that you're missing a lot of lung. The idea is that it gives you better mobility, that if you're actually swimming with this on, you can.
Right.
But most people that are buying body armor are not diving with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unless you're really engaging in clandestine maritime warfare, that doesn't make sense. Get a full shooter's cut or a bulk's cut if you're getting full coverage armor.
Mm-hmm.
That makes far more sense.
Cool. Any parting advice before we wrap up episode 3?
I guess the other thing is you need to understand that it's not just penetration you need to protect from. There's also a lot of blunt force trauma. You can stop the bullet from going into you and still get killed because your body is made of non-compressible liquids, and that trauma can cause organ damage that can also kill you. So certain types of armor should also have a trauma pad behind it that's a non-Newtonian material that works like a shock absorber and absorbs a lot of that energy. We can talk for hours on specifics on body armor, but that trauma pad is, in my opinion, always a good idea, right? Get your plate, get your vest, whatever you're getting, add that trauma plate to it, and God forbid you actually have to catch it around. It's going to make it that much more likely that you survive the impact.
Protect your neck, y'all, and the rest of your vital organs while you're at it.